Have you entered our giveaway with Looking Glass Gems? Visit our Instagram at the Pastie Tapes to enter now. Looking Glass Gems, beautiful, affordable crystal rhinestones. Shop lookingglassgems.com or visit them live and in person at BurlyCon. This episode was brought to you by the support from listeners like you. Special thanks to superfan BFF level supporters Kyle H., the man with the hat, and Violet Passion. To support this podcast, join the Pastie Tapes fan club. Visit thepastietapes.com to join now.
Oh, hello! This is Blanche Debris, and you're listening to the Pastie Tapes, a burlesque podcast by Show My More, the steamiest Asian dumpling.
Thank you for listening to the Pastie Tapes. I am your host, Show My More, the steamiest Asian dumpling, recording live today from my closet in Chicago. I'm so glad to be back in this closet in my apartment in Chicago. I am so happy to be home. I've had such an exciting September. I am so grateful for all of the adventures that have happened in the past month. It has been wild and fun. And I feel like I've grown a lot as a human and as a performer. So thank you for all of that. Thanks for taking me on that ride. Thanks for putting me on that ride. All of that. I've been apart from Aria de la Noche for like 2 weeks now, and I really fucking miss her. That's like wild. I mean, it's not wild that I miss her. She's fucking great. But, you know, I spent a whole week with her in Nashville, her and Chandeliers. I really miss them. I think it's really wonderful when you find someone that you can travel with and it works and it makes everything so much easier. So I'm really looking forward to Aria and I both being home in Chicago at the same time. And then we're going to have our Mega Babe reunion with my idol, my mom, the love of my life, Chandeliers, at BurlyCon, where we're going to have a really hot babe kind of room. It's going to be great. I had a lot of time to think about this podcast and get a lot of feedback on the podcast while I've been out and about and playing on my phone for 1,000 hours. And I think like what's going to be the best for me as the producer, editor, voice, interviewer, all that stuff, I think we're going to move to like a 4 or 5 weeks on, 1 week off kind of schedule. I don't know. We're mapping it out. By we, I mean I'm mapping it out. I'm just trying to figure my life out. That's what I'm trying to do today. But here we are. Here you are. Thank you so much for listening to the Pastie Tapes. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. My guest is someone I absolutely adore. They are one of my dear friends from Nashville. I have known her for like 4 or 5 years now. I got to know her when I first started going to Delinquent Debutantes, and then we definitely reconnected a few years down the line once I was living in Chicago. She is such an incredible cheerleader to me. We spend a lot of time talking about career stuff, like very Muggle-based stuff. I adore her. I adore her husband. I adore the conversations we have around work and Muggle life and marketing and all of this stuff. She is incredibly wise and super talented and so fun. I really adore her. I think you're going to adore her too. This is my conversation with Nashville's own, the Shakespeare of Shakin It, Viola Vainglory. Hi. Oh my God, I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Hey, how are you, Shomai?
I'm good. I am good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be on Pastie Tapes.
Thank you for being on here. Oh, you've been such a good supporter. I'm so grateful that you're chatting with me on this beautiful Saturday afternoon.
It's beautiful here too. How nice.
Let's chat about your burlesque origin story. I know earlier this week I was telling you that I was going to go see a musical, and I was asking you like really dumb questions like, what do I wear? Like, what is this? Like, am I allowed to clap and laugh or like what?
Yes,
like,
they're going to need that.
Okay, good. You told me that you have like background in theater and all of that stuff. Can you tell me about your burlesque origin story, or give me that background? Tell me about your life.
Yeah, so I went to college. I have a degree in journalism, mass comm, but I also have a degree in theater. And I made the decision when I was about 21. I was like, I probably should have looked at costuming as a career, but I looked at acting. And I don't have an ingenue face, and I was too young to really be doing interesting character work. And I was like, I don't think I want to get rejected professionally for a living. So I had been doing community theater for years. And so I'm very comfortable on stage, but I never danced. So when my husband and I started dating, he was big into swing dancing. And so we started doing some of that. And kind of as I realized that he was the one and that we were going to get married, I realized that I had also done a lot of divorcing my mind from my body. I am one of those people who was always single. Like my sister is a serial monogamist and I am the opposite of that. And so I realized that I had really kind of disconnected my mind and my body. When you work in an office, you're just thinking about stuff all day and you're not really doing stuff all day. So I decided that I wanted to take a burlesque class. I was actually getting my oil changed. Saw an article about Freya West and delinquent debutantes in a now defunct magazine called Her Nashville. And oddly enough, sort of circuitously knew Freya's older brother and had gotten kind of like the sort of like, this is a cool thing that she's doing. It's a little weird, but it's neat. So I went out and took my first burlesque class with delinquent debutantes back in 2010. And that's where I met Freya, obviously. I also met Chandeliers, and Shan and I graduated together from Delinquent Debutantes in 2011. And I'm actually, oddly enough, recording in the building right now where the studio was when I was taking classes, if you can believe that, because the world is a tiny, tiny little bubble. But yeah, so I started performing back in 2011, and really I only thought that I would be performing for tops a year. And it's been 8. And I still love it. It's just being able to really connect back into my body has been so useful to me. And I think that the community as a whole has really taught me a lot of stuff about, honestly, just the basics of feminism and, cultural diversity in a way that you don't get exposed to it in other artistic communities. And so it's just been it's been an interesting ride. I started performing, like I said, back in 2011, I did my first show. I did a Nerdlesque act, and that kind of set the die for, I think, a lot of my career. I have done a lot of Nerdlesque over the years and a lot of weird, silly burlesque. We love dumb shit here in Nashville, and so I've got a lot of that.
Tell me about, like, your nerdy side. Like, where have you always been a nerd? What's your fandom like?
Oh, my fandom is everywhere. I love everything. No, so I always refer to myself as an art school kid. I've always been into the weird shit ever since I was young. And when I was in middle school and high school, I actually took an after-school class to learn how to draw comic books. And it was taught by a really great man who had a little comic shop in my hometown that unfortunately is now a cash advance store, which really just pisses me off every time I see it. I spent about 7 years at least twice a week going after school with this small community of mostly female artists, learning how to draw comics and reading. I read some of the big stuff. I read some Marvel and some DC back in the day, but I read a lot of independent comics. And I think it just really I was always a smart kid. That was just kind of my background. And I think being in that kind of setting, it was kind of like coming home. And I've always felt more at home in, I don't know, sort of outsider communities, which is strange. I always talk about how I'm the Marilyn Munster of my friend group. I'm never terribly like wild and out there looking, in my opinion, but I'm always with people who are on the fringes because I feel like I get that more than I get sort of the middle of the road. So anyway, yeah, I started out spending significant amounts of time in comic books and reading a lot of comic books, watching a lot of nerdy movies. And I was also starting to get into costuming around that same time. So kind of like the perfect amalgam of all of those things. And it just carried me through. I was always into sci-fi. I was always into comic books, anime a little bit. I shouldn't really claim anime, but I've always kind of done that stuff. And then the first act that I ever got paid to do, and this is really embarrassing, was a True Blood act.
Whoa. Unexpected.
I kind of love that I'm attached to True Blood though, because I love like campy horror and all of that, like really ridiculous supernatural stuff. So even though I don't have a deep love for where True Blood ended, I did love where True Blood started.
You do have a love of campy, right? Every time I've seen you perform like there's definitely an element of play in there for sure, right? You make it really fun. I remember seeing the first time I actually saw you perform, because I've known you for years, but I didn't see you perform until last year at the Nashville Burlesque Festival.
That's so funny.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I mean, it makes
weird.
sense based on like when you moved, but it's strange to me.
Right. Because like at that point, you had seen me perform
several times.
2 or 3 times at that point. The first act that I saw you do was your Ash from Evil Dead act, and what I know you as, at least like from the internet and from, BurlyCon and stuff, is like you're I think you're super pretty. And like my assumption was of course, Viola's going to do like a classic or something like that. And you did your Ash from Evil Dead act, which I think is great. And the set dressing is great. And I really hope that whoever's listening takes the time to at least check out the pictures on your website or find it online. But I remember coming up to you and your husband after the show and being like, oh my God, that was so unexpected. And they were like, what? You and your husband
This is my shit on the regular.
But I remember just being like, I'm so surprised. And it was kind of a reaction of like, wait, do you not know what Evil Dead is? Or like, do you not know who I am? And then I remember just being like,
That's amazing.
Nerdlesque is having a big moment right now. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really interesting, the sort of rise of Nerdlesque. I think that when I started performing in 2011, Nerdlesque was definitely a thing that was happening, but I don't remember there being Nerdlesque festivals. And now there are like multiple festivals that are entirely devoted to Nerdlesque. And I just think it's so interesting. And I don't know, I do a lot of cosplay in my personal life. Some of it connected to burlesque, but a lot of it isn't, and I think it's been really interesting to me to watch the sort of rise of cosplay and conventions and nerd culture. One of my first really successful Nerdlesque acts was Captain America, which came out in 2011, which is also when I started doing burlesque. But, that sort of like the Marvel MCU invading pop culture, I don't want to make too big of a deal about it, but I think that is a big part of what's kind of mainstreamed nerd culture, quote unquote. And I think that is spilling over into burlesque in a way that, it makes some people who are old school nerds uncomfortable, I think. If you're like me and you grew up watching Star Trek and listening to Monty Python and, feeling like the outcast, I think that makes some people uncomfortable. That other people who like sports or whatever are suddenly also into superheroes. And you're like, but those don't go together. But I love that they do now. I love that that's something that we're kind of all starting to share. And there's weird stuff too with the rise of superhero culture and what does that mean for us as in Western culture. What does it mean that we love superheroes so much? Why do we love these characters that have these sort of godlike abilities who are dealing with...
Why do you love them?
Oh, well, Captain America is probably my favorite bean for that. And I think that archetypes, we're drawn to archetypes, right? Like we're drawn to the idea of these sort of pure forms of character. And I think that what I love about Captain America in particular is that Captain America he's such a good boy. And I think he finds ways to be good in a challenging world. And he doesn't always get it right, but he's always trying to. And I think there's something really beautiful in that. I think a lot of times we love an anti-hero. I mean, I love Loki too. But I think that idea of looking for good in the world and believing that we're capable of it is something I believe in very deeply. And so that's what appeals to me, I think, about a lot of superheroes, is that idea of there's something worth preserving and there's something worth fighting for. So I don't know. I think that there is that idea of those very pure types of personalities. Like, I don't know, it's almost like we see what we could be in those characters. And I love that idea of kind of uncovering that.
Right. and having it all come through in pop culture.
Yeah. And I think it's an easier lens, right? Like it's an easier lens for us to swallow some of those things.
Talk to me about the more classic stuff you do, because you also have classic stuff. Like, you're not just a Nerdlesque performer. I think, like, you have a solid range, and, you know, the through line in all of it is fun and camp. And
yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, I mean, so my background, like I said, I have a degree in theater, and I did a lot of costuming work in theater. I've been sewing since I was like 16 years old, which means that I've been sewing for 2 decades. And I have just always loved being able to build these wild, over-the-top costumes, and burlesque allows me to do that in a way even theater didn't allow me to do it. I remember I did costumes for Hello Dolly like 10 years ago, and I was so excited because I got to make all these ridiculous hats, and it was the best fucking time. I was like, I'm gluing a bird on this shit. This is like 5 years before Portlandia even came out. It was amazing.
Ahead of the curve.
Oh, man. Was I ever.
Ahead of the bird.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, so I do love the sort of glamour of classic burlesque. I love, you know, there's so few opportunities in Muggle life to wear a fully beaded gown. And I love that burlesque gives us the opportunity to do that, to go out there and become this sort of glamour monster. You know, it's so over the top and wild, and it's just dazzling. And I love that spectacle. I think that's something that's really always attracted me about theater in general, and burlesque in particular, is that idea that you can do something that is so big that it just envelops the entire space. And so I think that's kind of the thing. And I think overall, you know, I don't know, just the idea of being able to put that on, like to put on that skin of being this total glamorous, perfect creature that, you know, doesn't have bodily functions. Who knows? There's something really appealing about it to me, to kind of be able to put that on and then know that afterwards you're going to be like, oh my God, I just like sweated through my underwear in a way that is truly unladylike. I think it's delightful. And I love that you get the opportunity to really just like put on whatever persona you want. And I think in terms of like the camp side of it, you know, I'm just such an enthusiast. Like I love the things that I love, and burlesque is one of the things that I love. And so I think that for me, like, I do have a couple of slow burn acts where I'm sultry and I hope appear powerful on stage. But for the most part, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so fun. Aren't we having the best time? Have the best time with me. This is the best. I don't know. I just feel like you get to show people a bit of who you are when you're on stage doing burlesque, whether that's some big, like the big main part of who you are, or some like deep, dark corner that you didn't even know you wanted people to know that you had. But I just love that you're revealing a bit of yourself to the audience by revealing yourself to the audience, literally.
Full circle. Like, have you always been kind of an arty child? Like, how did you end up finding this craft?
Yeah, I was always an artistic kid. I think that my dad is a musician and kind of took that to another level. My dad is a woodworker and a luthier by trade. So he
What's a luthier?
A luthier is someone who builds instruments. So he built, when I was 4 years old, he built the harpsichord for the symphony orchestra in my hometown. And it was the second or third time he had built a harpsichord. And then he took up building guitars when I was in my teens. And he still does that today. So I think, he's a contractor for his day job. He builds houses. And so I've always been interested in how things are constructed and how things are put together in addition to how they work. So I think I've always kind of had that inside out view of everything. I come from a family full of engineers. Both my grandfathers were literally rocket scientists. And I love knowing how things go together. And I think weirdly, that sort of engineering knowledge is kind of what makes sewing easy, because that's what's always hard about sewing, is figuring out how the pieces go together. I love learning new stuff with costuming, because you're just like, oh, that's how you get that thing to do that, or like that's how that clasp works, all of that stuff. But I was always really curious as a kid, and I was also very weird. And I think that when you're weird, it just kind of it gives you the opportunity to be separate from your peers. We'll call it an opportunity. I was very enamored with the idea of being a Renaissance man, so to speak, I think, when I was young. And so I wanted to learn how to do everything. Yeah.
And you kind of do everything now, right?
Sort of.
Yeah, like you make your own costumes, of course, like you build your own acts, like all of that kind of stuff. Like you're there, like in the hustle.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
I think you're doing great. You're doing great, sweetie.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so the other side, I guess, of your college experience, right, was mass communications and journalism.
Yeah.
In addition to theater. And you found yourself in a career at some point that was very heavily in marketing and communications. Can you tell me about how, this experience that you have in marketing and communications, how has that influenced how you do your burlesque hustle?
So I started out as a copywriter and copy editor right when I got out of college. That was kind of the first thing that I did, and ended up doing marketing for most of the last 15 years. And I had a real heavy emphasis on web. So I started out as a copywriter, as I said, and then kind of through a series of being the only person who was good in project management and the only person who understood what the developers were talking about, kind of ended up sort of falling into managing a lot of web products. My mom is actually a software engineer, so it was easy for me to have those conversations and then translate it back into quote unquote English for folks. So I spent a lot of years doing web. And for me, what's funny about it is I think because marketing was my day job, and I spent, I made VP when I was 32, so I was working pretty hard at it.
That is wild. VP by 32. Wild.
I'm intermittently proud of that. But for me, because I did so much of that during my day job, I actually was very, very lax about it with my burlesque career. So, I was super late to get onto Facebook. Everything was crazy locked down. I got onto Instagram even later than I got onto Facebook. And I did the minimum amount of effort that I could to promote stuff. Not because I wasn't excited about it, but just because that was what I was doing all day and had been doing all day for 10 years. Probably 2 years ago, when I was finally starting to get through the process of realizing that maybe I did not want to be doing this job that I was doing full time anymore, I started to put a little bit more effort into posting regularly and kind of using the advice that I would give to other people on my own stuff.
But also that was kind of like by design, right? If I recall correctly,
yeah.
You are at this really high level at this, at this impactful company, and I'm guessing you weren't out as a burlesque performer. Did that influence how you decided to burlesque and internet as well?
It definitely did. When I first started performing, like I said, I thought I was going to perform for like a year. So there was no reason to invest in putting anything out there on the internet. And then after that, by the time I realized I was going to keep doing this, I had already made like at least director. And so I was very protective of keeping that career going. And I knew I worked for a very conservative female boss who wouldn't have fired me by any means. She would have known that was illegal, but she would have taken me off the fast track. And she much was putting effort into growing me as a protege and kind of trying to fast track my career. And so for me, I had to balance, this hobby that I loved very dearly, but made no money at, but had a lot of my heart and my energy with this job that paid all my fucking bills.
Right.
Because I wanted to make sure that nobody found me. And, the funny thing about that is, honestly, it's pretty hard to find burlesque performers. I don't know what I was so worried about. This was pre-Fosta Sesta stuff, so it wasn't quite as bad as it is now. But I think I could have kept everything pretty damn open and been just fine. I have found that I have not been discovered by anyone I didn't want to be discovered by in the last 6 months since I opened everything up. And it does crack me up a little bit. But yeah, it was very much by design. I didn't want people to find me because I wanted to make sure that I could continue to progress in my career.
Right. That's fair. I think the only time someone's ever found me unintentionally is when someone else that they follow, shared one of my photos or posts. And this is my older sister's best guy friend, very much a guy. He had this moment where he was like, oh my God, like that girl looks familiar. oh my God, like I know her. I knew her as, as a baby freshman. Like I can see your mindset. Like I understand like wanting to protect, and I think a lot of people totally get that, wanting to protect that private side of your life, or, the part of your life that's paying the bills that you kind of need to guard a little bit. So that makes sense. And okay, something that I think is really cool, in hindsight, I think it's really cool, and the time probably a little terrifying for both of us, but the last BurlyCon, right, last November, we roomed together, and and it was awesome. I loved rooming with you and Gidget and Sophie. We had so many snacks. I don't think we ate like half of the food that we bought, but I think that's...
No, I didn't finish some of those snacks until like a month later, the ones that I brought home.
So something that I think was really cool and terrifying at the time was I was leaving my Muggle job at the time for a different one. Like I think you were in the room, or maybe it was someone was in the room when I got the phone call, with my new job offer and everything. And I remember talking to you a lot about it over the weekend, and I was really hopeful and kind of like, cool, like goodbye, bad job, like hello, new job. And I think you had like a similar-ish experience with your career and how it's overlapping with burlesque, like at that BurlyCon time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I actually really valued that conversation. I think one of the things that you and I talked about was we talked really transparently about money during that time, because we were in a similar field, and you were talking about like how much this new job was offering you versus the old job. And I really appreciated that you were like, oh yeah, this is how much I make. And I was like, this is how much I make, and it's 20% below market value, and that's why I hate my job.
Right. And also, like, I don't know, I'm very transparent. That's something that I find really important. I think women, especially like, professional women, like we don't have that opportunity to talk about money, or we're trained not to. I think everyone is trained not to, right? But you should know that, right? Like in this conversation, you found out that me with my like, I don't know what, like 2 years, 3 years. Okay, that's like not fair. But, with my like...
You also have a PhD, dude.
Well, okay. But, we found out in this conversation that like your, 10 plus years of working and being at a VP level, like we made the same-ish amount of money, and that was horrifying. Yeah. And that's like not a thing that should be the case.
Yeah, I mean, and it was one of those things too. One of the things that's always hard about like money and work is that you look at salary guides, but it's so hard to know a salary guide how it applies to your market.
Right.
And so that was very useful for me. And I think that I just wanted to take a minute to plug your transparency about how much money you were making. It was good for me to talk about that in the open. I think one of the things that's hard when you are somebody who has a very traditional day job that has a sort of traditional salary associated with it, sometimes it can be hard to talk to people who are full-time performers because the money is so different. And any kind of frustration that you're having about having a Muggle day job can seem, I don't know, it almost seems unkind to talk about that. But the reality is that, it's just a different set of problems. Yes, you don't have to worry about the money as much, but you have to deal with all these assholes that you fucking hate,
Right.
And
the time is different, right? And like the anxiety is different. Like
it's all different.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, neither of them are easy,
no,
and I'm not, I don't think either of them is easier than the other. It's so different. And I think sometimes that can be hard to have a conversation with people who are professional artists, because the things that they're struggling with are like the opposite of the things that you're struggling with. You're like, oh no, the money's fine. But like, God, if Greg doesn't fucking put the water cooler on properly next time, I'm going to strangle him, which just seems like stupid bullshit. But like the level of like grating irritations that you get in an office is completely different than what you do as a performer who has control of their time. Again, definitely not easier, just different. And so anyway, that's a little sidebar. I had been struggling with, aside from just the work irritations, I had really been struggling with depression. Like everybody, I get bouts of being low, but this was like, I spent 2 years in the garbage dumps and just like really unmotivated and all that other kind of stuff. And it happened at the same time that management reorganization happened. So it all fed into each other. But having that conversation at BurlyCon was really helpful for me too, because I think you were like, no, first of all, it's ridiculous that they pay you that much money. And second of all, it's ridiculous that they reorganize things in that way without giving you any opportunity to kind of succeed. And I just needed that at that moment. Like, I think that you were like on the precipice of starting this new and exciting thing that, you know, even if it didn't turn out perfectly, it was really awesome at the time to be like, these people value me. They're going to pay me this money that I'm worth. And I was like, I'm in this job and I've been there forever. And I think it's time for me to move on. And that conversation was honestly like maybe 2 weeks before I quit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, you know, there were other conversations that happened after that, but that was the seeds of me being like, maybe I should just this shit and get out.
And you did. And
I did.
Tell me about
Thank
what you're
God.
doing now. Okay, so you're not there anymore.
I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I'm still not totally sure. But I was lucky that, you know, when I was like the last day of my job was about 3 weeks before my husband and I were putting up a play that I was doing all the costumes for. And we had done these very elaborate costumes for community theater. And so I had a ton of costuming work to do. And it was awesome because it completely distracted me from any feelings of like being sad or missing that sort of day-to-day grind that I was worried I was going to have. I was like, okay, good. I've planned this well for my life. And it turned out I needn't have worried because I did not give a shit about leaving that job.
Like it was done and it was gone. And
it was done and I was so fucking happy. I had never considered that was something you could just do. You could just stop. You know, I think we're so trained with all the capitalist ideology that your worth comes from your productivity and all this other kind of stuff, the idea of just stopping. And then I got really busy with burlesque stuff, which has been an unexpected and very pleasant surprise.
Tell me about the burlesque work that you've been doing.
Yeah, so, you know, some of the stuff in town that I have not really been able to do. We have Skull's Rainbow Room here in Nashville, and we have live band burlesque every week. It's the longest running live band burlesque show in Nashville. I had always wanted to be able to be a part of the show somehow, but with a day job, it was just not feasible for me at all. Regardless of whether or not, you know, Freya would have me in the show, I couldn't do it. I couldn't work what were essentially school nights and then do that. And you know, Freya was like, when I told her I quit my job, she was like, well, I need some alternates for femceeing at Skulls. So if that's something you're interested in, I was like, yes, definitely interested in that. So I've been able to do that some. So that's been really lovely. I've really enjoyed getting to do that because one of the great things about emceeing at Skulls is that is almost all tourists. And it's a live band show. So there's sort of two elements that we don't get in live shows here in Nashville very often for burlesque. Like we really don't have many live band burlesque shows here, and which is kind of funny when you really kind of think about it. But we don't have a lot of that, and we also, but we're almost always performing for folks who know burlesque, initiated audiences, I guess I would say. There's always somebody there who's never been,
Yeah.
but when you're performing at Skulls, you're dealing mostly with people who've never seen burlesque, and some of them don't even know what it is. They just kind of showed up. They were like, we heard the music, it seemed cool.
Yeah.
We paid the cover. What are we here for? And so it's just so interesting. Like there are so many things that you know, you're just so used to hearing at burlesque shows that, you know, it's just like, oh, it's so tired. Like, oh, you know, do we have any virgins here tonight who's never been to a burlesque show? Sometimes that is the most scandalous thing that these people have ever heard on stage. It's just blowing their minds.
Right. Someone calling them a virgin in public in any sort of context.
I know. Yeah. And I do remember one night, for some reason I was subbing in on door duty, and we had two guys who were probably in their 20s. They paid the cover to get in. I think one of them had even asked what the show was. And, you know, they went in maybe half an hour before the show started. The band played a song. Everything was fine. And then the first act happened. There's a group act. And like literally during the group act, like one person takes off a bra. Like that's it. Like it's nothing scandalous. And these guys came screaming out the front door and they're like, this is the kind of show we thought it was. We got to go.
They left?
They left. They paid a $20 cover, stayed for one act. Yeah, $20 each. And I was like, whatever, buddies, get out. It's fine.
You already got your dollars. It's fine.
I
Go
know.
away. Whoa.
It's just such a different environment. It's funny, you know, when you've been doing burlesque for 8 years, and for me, I have only really started to travel this year. It was certainly terrifying. It always is when you're doing something new, but it was really invigorating too, to be able to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what this crowd's going to be like, because you never know what you're going to get at Skulls. And I also don't know how I'm going to do with live band burlesque. I've only done it one other time. So it's just been really cool to try that stuff out and kind of get to take traveling gigs. I haven't done that in my burlesque career because I had my very serious office job and I was very chained to my desk and never went out of town. And I always ended up working when I was on vacation. So like, that's just not doable when you're doing burlesque stuff. Like you really have to be in the moment or it does not work. And so I never really traveled and didn't apply to festivals in the beginning because I wasn't out enough. I didn't have any kind of social media presence. And so I felt like it was just too hard to get booked and all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So,
but now you're doing it. But now you're starting to travel. Like you're driving out with with chandeliers, like on out of town gigs or out of town photo shoots and having all these different and new experiences. How has that changed burlesque for you?
Man, it's very eye-opening. I think that I knew that traveling for shows was difficult. That was not news to me. But I think I was surprised by what some of the difficulties were. Like I expected, like, oh no, you get a bad night's sleep and then it's, hard to kind of keep yourself going, that kind of stuff. And then like the packing list stuff. But I think I was sort of underprepared for, oh, I'm not getting ready in my own bathroom, so I have to remember to bring all this stuff with me into this other room. I mean, just stupid stuff like that. But then there were other things that were so great. Like, you're so nervous performing in a new venue and like you're trying to figure out where everything is. But to be totally like surprised, like I did Bourbon and Bordeaux in Dallas and at the Nines, and that was just amazing. They're so into the show. It's such an intimate venue. And it was one of those things, like I just found myself kicking myself that I hadn't spent more time like out in the audience, actually like getting in people's faces and enjoying that. So it's been really cool. I think it's everything is always different than you expect it to be, I think. And I think that's kind of been the takeaway. I think that I expected a lot of the stuff to be harder than it is. And I don't say that to say that's easy. It's not. And if I was doing more of it, I think it would be significantly harder. But I was really kind of pleasantly surprised as a sort of born homebody at how much fun all of it was. I don't know. It's been such a blast.
Interesting to hear about your experience and then compare it to mine and be like, oh, wow, there's so many different ways to do burlesque. And I think that's exciting.
Totally.
Viola Vainglory, the Shakespeare of Shakin It. Thank you so much for chatting with me today on the Pastie Tapes.
It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Where can people find you on the internet? How can they support and learn from you on your Patreon? Tell me all these things.
Yeah. So I'm totally most active on Instagram. I'm at viola.vainglory, Viola, if you're curious about that. And Vainglory spelled the way you expect it to be. I'm viola.vainglory on Facebook as well. And then just because I have to be a weirdo about it, on Patreon, I am Viola Vainglory, all one word. And then if you want to find me on the internet, I am at violavainglory.fun. I will be at .com very shortly. I'm in the process of revamping my website, but I'm all over the internet. I'm where you are. Come see me.
Yay. Oh, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Shomai. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Viola. I know that I will see you very, very, very soon. And extra special thanks to you for noticing that I was like totally having like an internal collapse moment happening at the Nashville Burlesque Festival, like probably multiple times that weekend at different parts for different reasons. And on Thursday, I remember Viola just like telling me to sit down and then holding a fan at my face while I was kidding, and that was great. That's what I needed. I think I stayed alive because of her. And then again on Saturday, right, like about to have a panic attack while in a completely dark tube thing that I decided was a great idea to have as a prop that I travel with everywhere. Viola's there for me. Like, I fucking love her, and I hope you got to know her too through this conversation. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Pastie Tapes. Special thanks to superfan BFF level supporters Kyle H., the man with a hat, and Violet Passion. I also want to give a shout out to our friend level supporters, Kits and Sass, Tony Tabasco, Rosalie Bloom, and Fufu Kaboom. Wow, that all rhymed. Oh my god. If you want to support the Pastie Tapes, help me continue these shenanigans on into the future, visit thepastitapes.com and join the fan club now. I would love to hear from you. I thrive on positive reinforcement. Tell me how great I am. Tell me how much you love this podcast. Or don't. Tell me that you fucking hate it and let me know how I can improve. You can leave a message or send a text to the Pastie Tapes hotline, and that's 1-530-PASTIES. Or you can send an email to thepastitapes@gmail.com. You can follow the Pastie Tapes across the internet at the Pastie Tapes on Instagram and Twitter and other places, I'm sure. I am your host, Show My More, the steamiest Asian dumpling, and you can find me at Show My More across the internet. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Pastie Tapes, and I will talk with you soon.
You have been listening to the Pastie Tapes, a burlesque podcast by Show My More, the steamiest Asian dumpling. This is Blanche Debris saying thanks for listening, and see you later, ducklings.
You can catch me performing across the Midwest this winter, but you can especially find me at BurlyCon. I will be teaching my workshop, Cooler on the Internet, and I'll even be leading a Burly lab called Social Media in Your Sleep. If you want to learn how to have some internet fun with me, find me at BurlyCon. If you're not going to be there, feel free to send me a love note, and let's talk about other ways that you can learn. Some other cool things coming out. I have a new 1-inch enamel pin designed by Blues Chicken that should be here soon, available for pre-order. If you want to have a fat babe body pinned on ya, if you want to have my fat babe body pinned on ya, check out my Instagram. You can see the illustration and let me know if this is something you want to pre-order. Happy to hand it over to you at BurlyCon or mail you something with a love note. Okay, until next week. Talk to you later.